Thank you. We have everyone. Council members Snell. What's that? There's a fridge, and I could use caffeine enough that I'm drinking a Diet Coke.
Anybody need a Mountain Dew or a water?
Of course. What's that?
Open bar.
Okay.
You put your time in. Grab a drink.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're to item number 10, discussion of irrigation ditch and Hill Farm subdivision. The requester to be on the agenda is actually Kevin Hill, so we'll yield the time first to him. Thank you.
Thank you. I commend you for your energy and endurance. It's beyond mine, but hope you are up for one more story about a longtime resident of Kaysville and coping with change. I've lived in Kaysville for 64 years with an occasional excursion out, but been on Angel Street essentially all those years. The issue tonight that we come to you is to essentially ask that the city enforce an ordinance on the books that would protect our rights to the continued use of an irrigation ditch that's we've used for more than 20 years. I've talked with Andy several times about he's been very helpful. He showed me the ordinance that applies here. I think everybody's seen a copy of that, that any irrigation ditch in use needs to be maintained and piped by a developer. And so, of course, Destination Homes has declined to do that, or at least our contention, our focus tonight is that the current permit that they're working under shows that ditch to be piped, and currently the status of the ditch is that it's damaged, it's half filled in, there's a fire hydrant in it, the top of the ditch is dammed off so that no water can get out on their work area. So that's our request. I'll introduce Larry Williams as our counsel we've retained to help us understand kind of the legal aspects that are going on here. But that basically is what we'd ask of the City Council.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, do you have anything to add, paraphrase? Or?
Briefly, hopefully. I sent you all a letter stating out our position earlier today so that we didn't have to spend a lot of time in discussing that. If you have any questions about that, I'd be glad to answer that. Essentially what we have here is a position that plat was approved. It was approved with the acknowledgement and understanding that there was a ditch there, that the ditch was being used, that it was likely to be continued to be used, and that a pipe would need to be installed. The plat was approved with installation required as a condition of that approval. And now we are understanding that there's no intention to put that pipe in, that they don't want to acknowledge that that ditch exists, and that there are no rights there. The homeowners here, I think there's 5 homeowners that are serviced by this irrigation ditch. They will continue to need service from that ditch. They have a property right in that ditch to receive water through it. And what we're asking right now is that the city be directed to enforce the provisions of the plat and the conditions of the plat, so that those property rights will be protected.
Thank you. Andy, do you have maybe some background to give us from a city's perspective?
Just quickly, the background. The property outlined in red, if you can see the red line, is essentially the Hill Farms Phase 3 development. It's the blue line here. This is the ditch in question. It runs along the west side of Angel and serves the 5 property owners mentioned. Kaysville City ordinance clearly states that if an irrigation ditch lies on property being subdivided, if the ditch is going to remain in use, it needs to be piped per the city's and the irrigation company provider's specifications. Knowing that the ditch has been used over the years, we made that requirement when this development came in. The developer has argued that ditch was used as a favor to those property owners that their actual service ditch comes over here somewhere, and that's their designated ditch to the irrigation company. And that Mr. Joe Hill, who previously farmed this property, allowed them to use that ditch with his permission. We've looked at it. There's a lot of issues involved that are not easily resolved. So the question is the ditch in use or is the ditch not in use? Is really the only question the city has. If it's in use, it needs to be piped and remain in use. If it's not in use, there is no obligation. In fact, the ordinance says that if it's not in use, then the ditch will be removed. So I've got one party saying, yes, the ditch is in use and we have a right to use it, and the other party saying the ditch is no longer in use and there is no right to use it. As recently as today, late this afternoon, I got a letter from the irrigation company that provides water to that ditch stating that they would no longer serve water into that ditch regardless. So if that would happen 6 months ago, we probably wouldn't be here tonight, but that's what it is. But that's the issue we're faced with. Is the ditch in service or is it not? Other issues, I don't see there as being particularly a city issue. We just need to know, we've got the ordinance, how do we enforce it?
Why was there an engineering plan and profile showing it piped?
So we would
I mean,
not
I
let
think
them.
this stems further than 6 months ago. Why was that profile created?
It was
That obviously
created
showed
because there
intention
was
that the
no
ditch was in
evidence
use.
given to me that the ditch was not in use.
Say that again, Andy, what?
There was no evidence given to me that the ditch was not in use. I did have evidence that it was in use.
Right, and the plan and profile is created by the developer's engineer, so that's not the city creating that.
That's correct.
So there must have been some sort of consensus years before we got here about this ditch. And isn't there prescriptive rights? You
That's
know,
the
I think
question.
there's a lot of moot points here that
The real question is there prescriptive rights or is there not? And we don't have the answer to that.
Well, just a question, well, first a comment and then a question. It wouldn't seem that if it's in use, which it clearly was from, like there's water flowing down it and being used, and then the new owner of the property, the developer, then makes it so that it's no longer in use, that wouldn't, it wouldn't seem like that party would have the right to say, well, look, we dammed it and filled it in and now it's no longer in use. Therefore, we win that argument. But on the other hand, there's another, and here's where the question part comes in. The irrigation company decided that irregardless of whether it was in use, they were going to cut service to.
Yes, and as Mr. Adams stated, there's the question of prescriptive rights. There are laws that say if, under certain conditions, if a property has been used in a certain way for a certain number of years, that user has the right to continue to do that. With Mr. King, we've looked into that, and there's a lot of, I don't know what the right term is, a lot of special facts that need to be determined to establish that right. And those facts are not known and have not been determined to know if there's really a prescriptive right. One party is claiming they have that, and they meet the criteria. The other party is claiming that they haven't met the criteria, and therefore no prescriptive right exists.
Okay. Was there any reason given by the irrigation company for cutting off service to
The irrigation company is here, and that'd probably be more appropriate for them to answer that question.
Yeah, I'd like to hear their explanation, definitely.
Scott Green with Kaysville Irrigation. I'm president of the company. Historically, they got their water down Weaver Lane, down Angel Street into their property, okay? Because of the inconvenience and because Joe Hill allowed them to get it this way, they weren't ever set on a schedule. Now they're set on a schedule. They have a 22-inch pipe that delivers water to them down Angel Street, or down Weaver Lane and Angel Street. Before, they had just a 12-inch pipe there at the bottom of Angel Street that they got their water from. We cleaned the ditch 3 times, cambered it twice to make sure there's no debris in it, okay? We did a test flow with Kevin Hill there, Andy Thompson there, Steve Bingham, myself, and 2 of my workers. Kevin was receiving sufficient amount out of this pipe. If he would take his 15-inch pipe and turn it sideways and make it a little bit larger, he would get more than what he needed. They're claiming there's not enough flow down that ditch. We showed him that there was, and he showed us that it was overflowing down in his pasture, okay? Historically, they're supposed to be down that other way. They've always been on a schedule. They've never been taken off that schedule for their hours, okay? It's kind of an inconvenience to have to get up at 1 o'clock in the morning. We understand that. But that's part of being a shareholder on an open ditch, okay? When Kaysville City allowed them to build that subdivision to the east, we moved the ditch, piped it with some HDPE pipe fused so there wouldn't be any problems behind these homes. Now that Joe Hill is gone, Mr. Ferber is the only person left on that ditch. When he sells, there'll be no one on that ditch, and I won't have to maintain that ditch behind there. Okay. Okay. Right here, the head gate is where it goes into this property right here. And behind here is where we had to relocate that ditch for this subdivision here. Okay? Once he's gone, which we understand when he comes back, that he may be selling, okay? And then I won't have to worry about this ditch all the way up. It goes up a quarter of a mile or more. And we don't know who's going to maintain this ditch. It's not going to be Case Creek's ditch. I don't want to maintain ditches in the backyard. That's why they get their water from here and down here, and they can get sufficient amount right here, okay? We do not want to maintain a ditch in the backyards unless Kaysville City wants to maintain that and put them on a schedule. Okay, and I don't know if you want to do that or not. If they want to do it, they're going to have to blue stake it, maintain it, clean it, and keep it clean. And if they don't do it, then who's going to be responsible for it? It will not be Case Creek Irrigation. We'll take care of this part over here and maintain it. We've already agreed that we would fix the head gate right here at the creek so it's a little easier access because it's right in the sidewalk. And we'll maintain that we'll keep this clean because the farmers, and once this property is sold right here, it's going to be pressurized from a line that we have in Layton Parkway. And what we want to do is bring it down and then maybe bring them a pressurized system. But they live in Kaysville, and you guys have an agreement with Davis and Weber. But it could supply their pastures in the back, okay? I don't think Davis and Weber wants to spend water on pastures. We would probably slip line a line through here in the future, and I don't know when that's going to happen, okay? But right now, we do not want to service this ditch because of the future liability of the irrigation company by putting water down that ditch when nobody's going to maintain it or nobody's going to take liability for us unless Kaysville City wants that liability, and I don't think you want them to do that. Any questions?
Who's maintained it for the last 20 years, Scott?
Joe Hill has.
Joe has?
Yep.
So your motivation to get rid of it is just less line to maintain?
It is. And the liability. You know what liability can be in the backyards. People punching it, people putting sheds over it. Because after we're gone, people are going to continue to do that.
That is actually a good point. I mean, as far as right-of-way access to get in to maintain it, is there, you know, I mean, it at least raises the question, is there a right-of-way there to get in to maintain it?
I have a right-of-way at the end of this ditch, at this property right here. The guy has put a basketball court over it and made it so we can't drive back there. So how do I maintain my head gate back in here when he doesn't allow us to get back in there? And that's the same problem you're going to have here. Something happens to this ditch, how are you going to get in these people's backyards to clean it and maintain it?
Well, and there's ditches in backyards all over the place.
There is.
You know, over in Clearwater, you know, there's ditches running along the 4 and 5 plexes that we've piped in, and, you know, we're happy to do that. We didn't want to get anybody's irrigation issues. We just, you know, we just didn't fight these issues when we developed. We just did it. You know, and so I think it comes down to the prescriptive rights, and I think it comes down to the inverse side of this argument that I haven't seen presented yet, which is that the ditch or the head gate, this is the stream, correct, where the trees are?
Yep. And there's a head gate right there.
Well, this head gate where they're saying, hey, go over here and get it. Yeah, Scott, maybe on that one day it was fine, but I've heard them say the problem is that the, Kays Creek, it's too invariable on the flow, that somebody upstream is taking the water. Because it's not coming out of the creek, there's a pipeline up in here, right?
That's right, there's a pipeline that comes down Weaver Lane. Everybody's on turns.
Yeah, and so the issue is that I foresee for, I don't know who this issue lies on, in the future, if they go to get water here, and their service is not whole, they don't have the water they need, who takes the liability for that?
It's the farmers, just like they've done for 100 years. They chase it up the ditch, like they've always done. All of them do the same thing. They've always done it. We did it up in East Layton all the time. We'd have to chase the water. Somebody's made a mistake, left their head gate in, and things like that. But most of them have been pretty good.
But with the fact that there's, and I think the line is actually here, isn't it? It's not, is it there?
It's right there.
Okay. Well, Vector trucks can reach out 600 feet or so, to clean a line.
Okay, who's going to maintain that? Not me.
Does it fall back to their prescriptive rights? Why was there a plan and profile created?
I don't know.
I don't understand that. Why would you pay an engineer to create a plan and profile and show this being piped with RCP, which is pretty resilient to fence companies, and typically in this scenario, you would set it off.
But you're going to get roots in that. That's why you would go with something different if you did it. But you're going to get roots in that cement pipe. We've got them at the problem up there by Dan Layton's problem, up above him. It's been RCP pipe, and he's got roots in it now. After time, it's going to happen.
Well, yeah, we could argue, then.
Well, you've never cleaned the ditch out
then
there.
maybe Destination uses HDPE.
Yeah, that's what we used
Then
here.
your root argument, or the root argument becomes moot. But if Amcor were in the room, they'd probably debate us for a few hours on the root issue, the manufacturer of concrete pipe.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying,
But-
who's going to maintain it? When that gets damaged or something goes into it, who's going to maintain that ditch? Kaysville City?
Well, I don't have the answer for that. But
I don't
I'm
either,
trying-
but I'm
trying
gonna tell you,
balance out
Kays Creek
20 years
Irrigation.
of 20 years of uninterrupted use, and then this comes along, a plan and profile is created. Why was that created? Somebody obviously thought, okay, that ditch has to be.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's not, I'm sorry, I forgot your last name. I think that's
Scott Green.
not a question for you, and I appreciate you answering the question, though, with regard to why the irrigation company, you actually haven't had to maintain that ditch.
We did not maintain that
In the
ditch.
past, and so
Never
that
did.
would be-
Joe Hill did. He owned that property. He put the ditch in.
Yeah.
He put the ditch into water here in this property when he owned it.
Yeah, and that was my question, and I think you've answered that very well. Thank you.
Okay.
The question, I guess, about why the plan and profile, is there someone from Destination that wants to answer that? Mr.
Hi,
Beal?
Steve Bean with Destination Homes, and Andy, if I'm remembering this wrong, correct me, but here's why it was put in. We delivered the plans to the city for review before our final plat approval without any pipe on it, because it was our belief, and still is our belief, that ditch that Joe had dug himself, he had given permission to some of the neighbors to use, but that there wasn't any existing easement, nor do we believe a prescriptive easement has been created. Now, we just differ on that. They think they have one, we don't think they do. As it went in to get reviewed and circled around to the different departments, it came back at our pre-construction meeting that Larry in Public Works believed that this would still remain in use. And we disagreed with them from the get-go. But we had two options at that point. One was to have the fight then that we're having now and to delay everything and have part of our damages be, if we prevailed, the loss of time of us starting the development. And so we said in that pre-construction meeting, Andy, we'll put it on. We don't agree with it. We don't believe it will be in use. It's a ditch that was owned by the property owner, and now we own it, and we're revoking that permission that was given previously. So it was put on, and we've really been working on this issue since then, both with Joe Hill and getting his recollection and his signed affidavit as to what his recollection is of it, of when him and his brother Dick put the ditch in, the permissions that were given to several of the existing property owners, but also to previous property owners Mr. Telfer being one of them, which was a previous owner to Rick Johnson. So that's why it got on the plans, and we've been working.
What is Destination's angle? Why are you so against piping it?
We just don't think it's our responsibility to do it. And to your point earlier that you mentioned, in other cases, we have piped thousands of feet of ditch when it's a tailwater issue, and that's the tailwater flow, or when it's a supply line. This is a private ditch that Joe dug and let some other neighbors use. And so it's not a supply line from the irrigation company, which we wouldn't have fought and haven't fought in those circumstances in any number of developments that we've done. So our position is, it was a ditch was dug by a private property owner. He was letting some of his neighbors, as a courtesy, use it with permission. And we're saying they have a prescribed way. And by the way, we want them to get their water. And we're willing, and I've had this conversation with Kevin and with some of the others now as well, that we're not looking for a fight, but we also don't believe it's our responsibility to spend the $30,000 or $40,000 to pipe a ditch for which there is no easement. There's no, and the reality is right now there is no easement. Might they have a prescriptive right? They might. We don't believe they do, and that would need to be proved not by this body, but by a different body.
Yeah, I mean, when your neighbor's fence is, or when your fence is 10 feet onto your neighbor's fence, I mean, it's yours after the prescriptive rights are up. You know, there's no easement or paperwork required on it, you know, but there's several attorneys in the room. I mean, we probably could take some advisement on prescriptive rights here. We're not attorneys. But
And their
your
attorney
angle
believes
is
they
you
have a
don't
good
wanna
case,
pay
and our
for
attorney
it.
believes that we have a good case.
Your angle is you don't want to pay for it. Scott's angle is he doesn't want to maintain it. Kevin, are you Kevin? Yes. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. So how do you guys feel about that? Would you guys pay for the Vector truck for the next however many years, you know, if it needs to be flushed? It's not all the time you got to go and Vector truck these out, by the way.
Yeah, we understand there's, some ramifications to maintaining that ditch in a pipe, and we're willing to take those on. We just don't, the other part of the history that's important here is that Joe dug that ditch 30-something years ago because he could not get adequate water flow down the other direction. And he did allow us to use that water because it was coming right through the same ditch. And so before there were any homes there at all, it was all in farm ground. So that's the reason the ditch is there to begin with. It's sort of a side issue in a way that there is an alternate route that we believe is inferior. On the day we tested the system, a rainy day with the creek raging full of water and no other users on the ditch with open head gates, the ditch is capable, physically capable, of delivering enough water. That's much different than it being a practical delivery of water during the summer on water turns. There are some 20-plus users up that ditch that have to be coordinated and paying attention to their water tickets in order for that to work. Down this ditch, obviously, there's been 2 or 3. And so it's a much more efficient way to get the job done. It's also much shorter. It's about 1/4 mile of ditch here versus over 2 miles coming down the Weaver Lane direction. So those are the reasons we're not comfortable with giving up a system that's proved to work very well for over 25 years for a lot of promises of we can fix this head gate and we can make sure people do this and that's never proven out before. So that would be our position.
So we've been talking about.
Can you go to the microphone, please?
Prescriptive easement. Mr. Williams may disagree with me about this, but a prescriptive easement establishes a right to use real property in a certain way. In my opinion, does not include the right to compel the ditch company to put water into your ditch, even though you might have a prescriptive easement. The attorney for the ditch company has unequivocally stated to us in the hall that they will not ever put water into that ditch. Now, that's a fight between Mr. Hill and his group and the ditch company. Kaysville City's kind of in the middle here. So if the court or somebody compels the ditch company to put water into the ditch, then I guess it'll have to be piped. But until that happens, all of the evidence the city has is that the ditch will never be used. So there we are.
Yeah, thank you for that, Felsha. I think that, Mr. Williams, if you have
Yeah, I just
something to
wanted
comment.
to
that's-
respond to a couple of things here, just for clarification. There's been a lot of talk here about what rights that the homeowners have in this. Here, we continue to use a term which may or may not be accurate, called a prescriptive right. What I am telling you is that we do have a right. It may not necessarily be based on prescription. There are many different ways in which rights arise for water and for water transportation and ditches and so on. A prescriptive right is one way in which that right does arise. There are also other ways, and we believe that and have stated that we believe that there is a right that these homeowners do have with this. It isn't all based on permissive use versus non-permissive use and so on with that. But that's not what's really important to this board tonight, is whether or not there is a right here. What is important here is kind of a timing issue, and the conditions and qualifications that were required when the subdivision was approved. Now, you heard Destination Homes say that they had a choice of having a fight whether or not there was a ditch right there at that time, back when they were looking to get an approval for their subdivision, or they could just kind of accept the fact and get the approval, because that was what the city was going to require, was that they either needed to prove that they didn't have an encumbrance on their property, or they were going to have to pipe it if there is, in the event that there is a right on there. What we're saying today here is that that condition was a condition of approval. It was there to protect the rights that the homeowners have. That condition has not been removed. And that implication, the acceptance that Destination had, was very specific. They said, yes, we'll accept that condition on the plat if you'll approve it. What we're asking now is that the city recognize that they accepted that and that they do what they said they were going to do when they got the approval, which was, sure, we will make the investment, pipe the ditch. Whether or not water goes in it really isn't a matter there. We believe that the water will go in there. It has for more than 20 years. It's the only way in which these homeowners can get a flow and a volume that will adequately water their property in the time that's allowed under their water right there. Let me speak real briefly here about the irrigation company. Said that it was inconvenient and that they don't want to maintain, I believe it was the upper ditch. I got a little trouble seeing where you were pointing at the time, in the future. That's a discussion again for future. It's another timing question. Right now, they're maintaining that part of the ditch because they have other users on that ditch. What they're saying is, well, in the future, we may not do it. That's a discussion that the homeowners, the water users, shareholders need to have with the irrigation company. Again, it doesn't really impact the requirement on the plat that this be ditched. Other than that, I think that's all that I had.
Can I just ask a question, Mr. Williams? With the irrigation company saying I mean, unless I misunderstood them, in no uncertain terms, will we maintain that ditch or will we put water in that ditch? And again, it kind of puts us in a little bit of awkward situation because we're saying, if there was water running, then yes, the ditch would need to be putting it. If there's not water running, then I guess our ordinance would say that it isn't. How do you plan to reconcile that, having the ditch company themselves say, under no circumstances will we put? So, I mean, if I hear what you're saying, hey, look, we want you to require them to put this in because we believe water will come.
Correct.
And then you have the irrigation company saying water will not come. And then we're kind of caught in between those two sides saying, yes, we believe it will, and the provider saying, no, it won't. And I'm happy to yield the question if you'd like to answer that
No,
first.
let
and
me,
then-
let me answer it in two ways for you, real quickly. Number one, if you don't require this pipe to be put in there, water will not flow. That I can tell you right now, because it's not there. That will be taking away a property right that the landowner has there. So if you simply make that decision, say, we're not going to require a ditch, or that ditch to be piped this time, water will not flow because there's no available way to do that. That's item number one. Number two is that water has flowed on this ditch historically for more than 20 years. I think Mr. Hill said 34 years, something to that effect. For a long period of time, it has flowed that way. Now they're coming back there, and until very recently, what I'm saying very recently, within the last month, that was not what we were hearing. There was no discussion like that, at least to my understanding. There was not a discussion of that. Why they've changed, we haven't received any reason for this change of position. We want to talk with them and find out what their reasoning is and why they think that that's not a good idea. We understand that there's a question of maintenance and ownership and liability. We can discuss that. That's something that's really between the irrigation company and the homeowners.
It sounds to me like most of the decisions are, I mean, that most of the issues relevant to this are between the users of the water and the irrigation company. And we're not a body that is prepared to make the decision as to whether or not the ditch is to be piped, or whether or not, or whether the actual ditch is going to ever have water. Those are decisions that are to be done. I mean, it sounds like today we received that information from the irrigation company saying definitively, pretty definitively anyway, that they would not. I don't know, and I don't know that any of us know about prescriptive rights, or about, to the point where we could make an adjudication or a decision tonight about that. It seems like, and I don't know if there is, at the state ombudsman's office, if there is, we could have, go to him. You could, we could refer the parties. It sounds like you're at somewhat of an impasse, that you can't come to an agreement on whether or not that pipe is, or that ditch needs to be piped, or whether there will be any water. I don't know. And Phil Shaw, you've stood up now. Maybe that's already happened. But
Let me ask this let me answer your question, I think, first. And that is because we're not here to ask you about those issues.
Right.
You're not the adjudicated body for those issues.
You're
What
right.
you are adjudicated body for is a representation that was made that induced an approval of a subdivision. Representation was that we recognize that ditch and we're going to pipe it. All we want to do is have that condition of the plat enforced. Now, if there isn't a right there, should they have quieted title beforehand? They recognize that there was at least a potential claim. That was a business decision that was made, that they would recognize the right in order for them to obtain the permit. All we're asking now is that that decision be enforced.
Yeah, they're just asking us to uphold.
Mr. Williams just said, in talking with Andy and having some little background about how these things work, it's not unusual to make changes on a plat, even though it's been approved, as circumstances change before final construction. So I think that's what happened here when the city found out this ditch was no longer going to be furnished with water. Then that provision of the ordinance, which Andy read, came into effect. But the reason I stood up, Councilman Snell, was that we have suggested to the parties that this matter be referred to the state property rights ombudsman, but apparently there's been reluctance to go that route for whatever reason. So Andy and I have been working on our own request to try and get the state property rights ombudsman to assume cognizance of the case, but we deferred taking that step until we saw what happened at this meeting. But I would hope the parties would agree to join in that request so we can get a decision from the ombudsman that would benefit everybody instead of possibly becoming involved in protracted litigation. So, yes, if they're not willing to join in that request, maybe you would like us to see if we can get the ombudsman to assume jurisdiction over this issue and render a decision.
Well, I don't know if we
Yeah.
really need the ombudsman.
I want to hear what he
Yeah,
has
this-
Yeah,
to say.
sorry,
Asking,
buddy.
yeah.
Go ahead, man.
I'm Travis Hill. I'm also a user, and at the risk, I know I shouldn't disagree with my father publicly, but I'm going to take that risk.
Dad, hunker down.
The visual observation of a flow during the spring of the year without any quantification whatsoever of that flow is, I cannot accept that. Nor do I think anyone would accept that as being adequate or inadequate. I mean, how can you just tell by looking at a stream what the feet per second is, gallon feet per second? There's no way to know. So there's been no quantification, no proof whatsoever that this other more tortuous and longer route would be sufficient. But what really bothers me most is the ludicrous position that Caves Creek Water is taking, and how Destination and even the city attorney are seeking to conflate these issues. Number one, they've stated that they will provide water to Dave Ferber. You cannot provide water to Dave Ferber without providing water to that ditch. The ditch has been in continuous use and was in continuous use last year. The only reason it wasn't used today is because they filled it in. So I don't want to say it's a bald-faced lie, but it's a bald-faced lie to say they won't provide water and yet at the same time say we'll provide water to Dave Ferber. What would prompt them to take such a nonsensical position? I have no idea. But I wonder if it's not related to the conversations I heard this evening in the foyer between Destination Homes representatives, Felshaw and Andy, about whether or not Destination would indemnify Kaysville City and Case Creek Irrigation Company if we chose litigation. Now, I smell a rat. That is wrong. And I don't know if it's illegal, but it should be. And I'm ashamed to think that people in this community where I grew up and where I live would even engage in such tactics. We've never done.
Felshaw, hold on, Felshaw, you can respond as soon as he's done.
I know there's been talk of a letter of indemnification. I don't know why that's necessary. I don't know why you consistently seek to conflate these issues when all we're asking is that the permit, as it was approved, be enforced. We have, as far as I know, business has always been done in this city in an honest and a straightforward manner. And to have this sort of nonsensical behavior and confusion that's to a point ludicrous, and I'll stop short of suggesting that perhaps maybe there's even collusion, is wrong. And it bothers me terribly to think that people would engage or even entertain such practices.
Thanks, Travis.
Felshaw?
In consultation with Mr. Thompson, the city engineer, and upon the representation of the ditch company that they're never going to put any water in the ditch, it appeared that this would not be appropriate to require a useless piping of a ditch that was never going to be used. But we recognize that Mr. Hill and his group had a different point of view, and so we prepared an indemnification agreement so that if the city approved not piping the ditch, that the city would not be at risk from lawsuit from the Hill Group because the city would be indemnified under that indemnification agreement. So yes, there is an indemnification agreement prepared, ready to implement if it becomes appropriate and necessary to do so. As far as any collusion, I wholeheartedly reject any inference of impropriety in that regard, and that at all times, Mr. Thompson and I were acting solely to protect the city from either side in the event of a lawsuit by either of the opposing parties. Any questions about that?
I think it's understandable why they feel that way, why we're already drafting documents as if it's going to go the way, you know, party A would like it to go. You know, I appreciate what you said. As I sit here and I think, this is the second time that I've, in my short time being on this council, that there's been a big issue arising with this developer in the way they're treating our residents. I don't stray away from saying this. I'm not here to represent Destination Homes. I'm here to represent my people. All of us are. We are here to represent our people. And when they come under conflict with stuff like this, we're here for them. You know, that's our job. That's what we're elected to do. You know, you changed the use of the property, not them. You agreed, hey, get us through this hurdle, we'll put it on the plan, but we'll walk away from it later, hopefully, we'll fight it later. I don't like that. You know, smelling of a rat. The last time we were in here, and I don't think we sat on this bench, I was over where you're sitting when the last time you guys had an issue was with, I'll leave his name out, but there's a neighbor down there who, similar situation. I mean, here, with your ditch issue, you put it on a plan, and so these guys go to bed at night thinking, we're good, cool, it's locked in. They've designed it, they've treated us fairly, it's all we want, and they go away, they don't fight the issue anymore. Then all of a sudden, at the very tail end of the deal, whack. Well, the same thing happened to Gary Rigby. I will use his name, okay? And I've reached out to Brad Wilson to try and help mediate with Gary Rigby, to no avail. So, no, I'm not happy with this. This is the second time we're going through this. It's time that we as a city uphold our people. You guys go figure it out, Destination. And I hope, you know, and well, I shouldn't say hope, but if they win, you ought to be paying their fees. For crying out loud, it's $40,000. What's the gross assessed value of Hill Farms? 50 million? More? You don't have to answer. 40 grand. Okay, I'm not trying to pick your pocket. I'm gonna, you know where I feel. I'm gonna uphold what this council or what our engineering department agreed and put in place 5, 6, whatever years ago. Because Gary Rigby felt the same way. He says, look, I was told this, and then I come back. And then I watched the previous council shun him a little bit and say, well, why weren't you at the meetings? Oh, come on. You know, how often do we take fire for not being communicative enough with the residents? You know, there's always going to be a gap where people think, well, I was told this, so I'm going to put trust in what I was told. Are we eroding everyone's trust here? What are we doing? In my opinion, we cannot do this. We have got to uphold what was put on that plan and profile. You know, and these guys are now snowballed and broadsided. You know, we've got to uphold that, in my opinion. I don't think it's right. And honestly, I don't ever want to have another neighboring property owner of Hill Farms come in here. These are the people of Kaysville. Hills, how long have you been here? Since the beginning, right? Forever. Okay, Destination, you changed the use. And the ditch issue, come on, Scott, I know you. You know, and I hope you guys can work this out. I hope you can work it out. But on our stance, are we going to walk away from a set of engineering prints that we approved? We never disapproved them, to my knowledge. No one has shown any evidence to this body that we disapproved those. So I think there's some sliding going on, and I think you can work it out, man. If these guys say, hey, we will form a private district, we'll form, you know, you heard Jake talk about a district for the curb and gutter earlier tonight. What if they're willing to form a private district, a maintenance utility district, and they will operate the ditch? You know, they will maintain it. You won't, Scott. I know your angle, Scott. I get it. I mean, you've got hundreds and hundreds of miles of ditch to maintain, and that is a royal headache. If you have an opportunity to abandon some ditch and utilize ditch over here, I get it, I totally get it, man, it's just, but we have a situation here. How do we help them out? All you've got to do is allow them to take the water, and you sign, and their improvement district says, once it leaves your creek, it is no longer your responsibility, it is ours. And that goes on the deeds of their homes, and so that future homeowners down the road understand, here's the drill. Just thinking outside the box here, but there has to be a way to create a win, 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 win.
Yeah, and you know, my thought was right along the same lines. When we had the issue with the Rigby's coming in, the council stuck to the plans. We stuck to the plans, and yes, it made Mr. Rigby mad, but we stuck to the plans. We said, hey, you weren't at the meetings 2 years ago when they made the plan. That's not our fault. But you guys, it sounds like you were part of the plans, and you've been planning on it being there all along. And so I say we stick to the plans. Be consistent.
Hey, just address a few things that have been said. And number one, I appreciate the righteous indignation that's being shared. And setting Mr. Rigby's issue aside, which is a completely different one. And so whether you want to tie those together or not, that's, I guess, a different story. Anytime you have plans that go out, it was based on a decision from the Public Works Director on information that he had at that time, which was information from the neighbors that that ditch was going to be in use. And we've heard from the ordinance, if it was going to maintain in use, then there would be responsibility for it to be piped. We disagree with that, and since that time, I mean, this hasn't been snowballed at the last minute, as
We should have
has been
disagreed with
indicated.
it then.
We did.
You told us a half an hour ago, you circumvented it to save time.
No, we disagreed with it and said, we disagree, so
Should
we
have put it
can
on
we
your
can either,
plan.
we didn't have the right to take it off them because Larry at Public Works said, based on the information he'd received, that he believed it would be maintained in use and therefore need to be piped. And so since that time, we've been working not only with the property owners, but met with Joe Hill on a number of occasions, got the history, got the affidavit from Joe Hill as to how that happened, and believe firmly in each case, and Andy can confirm this, I've sent, I don't know how many different letters over the course of the last year from irrigation companies, from Joe Hill, and from others saying, look, this supports the fact that it won't be in use. So we've been working on this. In addition to that, almost from the get-go, when we started talking with the neighbors, we said, listen, while we don't believe you have a prescriptive easement, and we don't believe, and we understand that we disagree on that, but we don't believe you have one, we'll give you an easement. We're not interested in paying for the pipe because we don't believe that's our responsibility. And I stand here today still saying we'll give them an easement today. All along what we've said is if we give you that easement and you guys want to pay to put the pipe in, there's obviously still an issue with Case Creek and they would need to get on board. And their biggest issue is they don't want the liability for it. So if the neighbors are willing and it's that important for them to not use the prescribed method of delivery for their water and they want this alternate method that they've been using for a long time and it's easier for them, we'll give it to them. What we need to have in addition to that is the assessment, right, the private assessment group that's set up that says we will take responsibility for it. We'll put the pipe in and we'll take responsibility for it. And if they're willing to do that, we will give them the easement today. I can't speak for Scott as to what he would do, whether he would give water to that or not, but if he had a guarantee that it wasn't going to be his responsibility, I suspect we could find a win-win-win. So we're not at all arguing that they don't have a right to get their water. And in fact, we've offered and said, listen, we're not interested in spending money, litigating and suing. We'll help take some of that money and let's find a solution. And Destination Homes will put some money towards, if it's fixing the delivery system down Angel, we'll put some money towards that. We want you guys to be able to get the water that the shares that you own in the company prescribe that you should get. So it's not about Destination Homes coming in and trying to be a bully. It's not about us not being willing to do what we're responsible to do. We have a difference of opinion as to what our responsibility is along that area.
I agree with you on the sentiment, but, you know, contrast this back into the curb and gutter argument. I mean, we're talking, we're thinking out of the box tonight of ways to take care of these folks who've been here for 30 years underneath different rules. Okay, It's the newcomers changing the landscape out there, not these guys. So they're saying, hey, I moved in on county and I wasn't supposed to have to pay for curb and gutter. You're the newcomer. You're changing their use. You're saying, I'll give you the easement, because yeah, that's easy. Why do they have to bear the cost of the pipe? How many feet of ditch is there, roughly,
About
as the crow flies?
1,000, I think.
1,000. Okay, 24-inch RCP barrel. I happen to have a spreadsheet of pipe breakdowns on my phone. It's what I've done for a living. It's $17.70 a foot. So is ADS, Advanced Drainage Systems, corrugated, $17.70 a foot. You want to go the HDPE route, that's a whole nother animal. I don't recommend it. It's not worth the money. Okay, and then you've got labor to dig a ditch that's knee deep. That's $5 a foot. $22 a foot. How many feet did you say? 1,200. Huh? 1,200 times 25. Who's got calculator?
Yeah, I appreciate the math exercise.
Well, we need to get into it. I
Councilman
mean,
Adams, but it's not about, it's about the fact that if it's our responsibility,
30
we'll do
grand.
it. We don't believe it's our responsibility. And we're willing to look at other solutions. And what we're saying is that the decision that was made on the initial plat was based on information that Larry had received that was completely one-sided. He was told, oh yeah, that ditch has been in use and it will remain in use. And if that were the case, we would have a responsibility to pipe it.
So go sue
We just-
Larry.
Sue the city?
Well, if you're saying that's why you did it.
So,
He's the city.
I'm not afraid of lawsuits. Those are unfriendly. I've never done one. I mean, if everybody wants to go that direction, that's your decision.
No, we don't.
It's not going to go there.
I think we've,
I think that's profoundly unwise to say we'd like to invite you to sue the city, but.
We
we've,
correct the record there. There was
pretty-
no invitation for that.
but we probably learned enough, I don't
tongue in
question
cheek.
anyone's motives, we probably learned enough about how this situation kind of came to where it is, and we've also understood what the city's responsibility is, and to the extent that there is any, it would simply be to say, we had a plan, we had a plat, it included the piping, but then the thing that, and we would enforce that. However, it seems silly, to the point that's already been made, to enforce putting the pipe in if no water's going to flow through it, or for any private agreement to.
And you should enforce it if there hadn't been any new information that came available, right? Remembering that the decision that was made when we came to the pre-construction meeting was, upon review, Larry said, hey, my understanding is this ditch is in use still and will be in use. And we said, that is not our understanding. That's not the case.
Yeah, so here's the hypothetical, and it's not really our decision to make. This is a, private thing, but maybe
It
we
is,
just
yeah,
ask
that's
the
probably the biggest point.
question
It is.
that Councilman Adams made, or asked, and that is, if there were some sort of a private agreement to maintain it, I'm not sure what that looks like, I'm not sure what the easement of the property owners there, there's a lot of questions, but assuming all that would work, Scott, would the water company be willing to then put water through it if you didn't have the maintenance?
I have to go to the board to make that decision, so we've already made a decision not to do this, because we felt the liability of the company by putting water down.
So if we could ease that burden, maybe the board we could appeal to their.
When these guys are gone.
Will you come to the microphone,
Go on there.
Scott, if you're gonna?
That's what I'm saying, they go on their deeds, on the,
Is it gonna fall back on Kays Creek 20 years from now?
I'd say it tracks with the deeds of their homes, and we're just looking to ease your burden, take it off of you, and I think that's a win for you.
Yeah, because my future is
Own
no
the shares of
ditches.
the water.
My future is all pressurized. That's what our goal is here. We have less people on the ditch now than we've ever had before.
Well, that was going to be my other question. If this circuitous route, I think you mentioned that that's going to be pressurized at some point. How
Well-
soon would that be?
That's up to Destination Homes when they develop this here. Okay, there's going to be a park here. Am I right, Steve? Okay. And what could happen is, we already have a line up there on Beaver Lane and Layton Parkway. We stubbed in years ago and we put a dry line in, and now it's loaded. And our goal is to bring it down through here, come across here, slip line this all the way down to these guys. They'd have a pressurized system for their back property, not their front, because Davis and Weaver has a trilateral agreement, And I think we could let them.
Is that where the flow issues are? You'd already mentioned that it went from 12 inches to 22 inches, so that improved it a little bit, but there's still this intermittent flow issue and maybe lack of flow, so they're at some detriment through the new situation. They're getting less consistent water. Would what you're discussing address?
Is a
would address their
pressurized
issue?
system
And so that would essentially address the issue, I guess, of
of everything.
In 10 years or whatever.
Well, whenever that's done, and when they're done.
You've been trying a long time to get pressurized lines through here.
I have.
What stopped you from being able to do it?
One of it's money, and one of it's development right here. I put all my resources in, we've put in 15 miles of pipe in the last 10 years from Hobbs and Andy Adams in East Layton. We're clear down to 2200 West in Layton, and we want to take it to this area because this is Layton. And we understand your trilateral agreement because we used to serve all this area at one time. But if Layton or Kaysville City would allow us to do that with Davis and Weaver's permission, I think within the next 4 or 5 years, when this is developed and all this is done, that this could be done also. Okay.
We're actually already submitted the plans to Layton City for annexation for that piece, so we're not talking 10 years, we're not even talking 4 or 5 years. We're talking probably 18 to 24 months before the piece that we've got from Hills in Layton is developed.
So just thinking through this, I mean, that may change the property owners and water right holders to, you know, that may change their assessment a little bit. I don't want to put words in their mouth at all, but if it's.
Assessments will be
yeah.
the same. Okay?
Well, all I'm saying is, if you wouldn't want to take at least it's possible that you wouldn't want to take responsibility to maintain a line if you could get the same water flow through in 18 months, for example, from a pressurized system. Why would you want to take the liability of maintaining a line down the, you know, so I'm just posing that question.
Down here?
Yeah, so I guess if there was another solution.
I won't take any responsibility there.
No, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If the property owners if the Hills and other
responsibility.
property owners, Johnson's and everyone took liability, responsibility to maintain that line, but they knew that they could have a pressurized system that would provide that would remove the detriment, provide the same water flow that they've had in the past, may not be worth it to them to do that, and I'll let them speak for themselves.
Yeah, you
but
know,
just-
because they'll have a pressurized system. They can sprinkle. They won't be on turns. They can sprinkle when they need to. They can put their, and there's lots of grants from NRCS that'll pay for like 80% of this and stuff like that. But yeah, there is a possibility if the plans have been submitted.
So the destination schedule of 18 to 24 months and your secondary schedule, they are not congruent, correct?
Well, if they get to there, because they'll put in the infrastructure here. All I'll have to do is tie in from here down to here.
So you have live line north?
I have a live line within probably 600 feet of this.
Yeah. Well, and obviously it's hard to base anything on speculatory too.
Well, we have money set aside for things, and plus we're working an agreement with Layton City that they're going to help pay for some of the infrastructures.
Josh, you're dying over there, man.
Does your livestock need reliable flow for the next 18 months? Yes, it does. Okay, so.
Can you just state your name for us?
Josh Belknap.
Thanks.
So that's great that it is likely going to happen. I understand that, but you don't have a concrete date of when that's going to happen, of when Kevin's going to have water. He's got a reliable source, or he had a reliable source before that was cut off. And this is indicative of developers coming into Kaysville and pushing citizens around, and it's wrong. And if Bingham Engineering can come in and support a big wig at destination to build a structure on his property within 10 feet of a property line and push that through and make that okay and ramrod that, then I don't know, why is this, I don't know, that bugs me, makes me mad. And that's a good man who serves this community. I don't know, I don't know, it's wrong to have citizens of Kaysville who have been here since the beginning, your ancestors, being pushed around by people coming in that will say whatever it takes to get initial plans pushed through, and then when the time comes, you know, they've taken you out on the date, they bought the dinner, well, now they can walk away. I don't know, bugs me. It's not right.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank him for calling me a bigwig, because I've honestly never in my career been called about you. Oh, I apologize.
That's not helping you there.
It's not good to get a big guy riled up. To me, it's relatively simple decision tonight is that should we maintain the original position of the ordinance, or should we change our position based on a request, not based on any legal opinion, any adjudication, just a request, an opinion. To me, that seems a little shallow. And I don't pretend that we have any more support for our point of view on our side, but we have a long-term history of use here that I think shouldn't be ignored. So, thank you.
Mr. Hill, I think I agree with that, and I think, pardon me, I don't know that there's even been an amended plat approval that's been submitted to us to alter anything. So we're still operating under the auspices of an approved plat. I don't remember if we're at final, preliminary and final, or I just don't recall from the history. I think we have final plat approval, if I'm not mistaken. So we're not amending that plat approval at all at this stage. That's the plat approval is as it is currently. And there has been no request to amend that at this stage, that I'm aware of, anyway, that's come before the council for a judgment on that. I do want to say, though, I mean, this issue, we do amend plats all the time. I mean, not all the time, but it's not uncommon to have plat approvals, even if they're at the final stage, come in for an amendment, or, you know, as information changes, you know, over the course of time. That does happen. It's a perfectly legitimate process that we go through, but it is a process. It's set aside in our ordinance that can be done. In this case, you know, whether or not that ditch is going to ever have water in it, whether or not the Destination Homes should pipe it, or, you know, some other entity that privately, you know, has an easement on it and maintains, or whatever, again, that's not really a decision we're capable of doing. And so I think it's important, in my opinion, to get some, if the parties can't agree to doing something, we're operating under the auspices of a final plat approval as existed with a piped ditch. That's the way that's operating as it is right now, unless and until we see an amendment, an issue come before the council for an amended plat approval. But in the meantime, I'd love, if the parties aren't going to get together, I'd love to have Felshaw and Andy send the information to the state property rights ombudsman, get a judgment out of that, get some kind of a judgment call on that. That's still not a perfect way. It's up to someone, but it's a third party that's designed to mediate in these kinds of things and to give a judgment on that. And that removes it from the hands of it, because that's a decision we can't make.
So, Councilman Snell, can I just make and I want some clarity as well. I don't believe, actually, and Andy and Felshaw can probably tell me for certain, this wouldn't amount to an amendment of the plat. When there's changes to utility placements and other things like that, I believe it's a staff level decision. There's usually not an amended plat. Would a decision based on information that the ordinance would be met because the pipe isn't going to be in use be required to have an amendment? And if so, then we'll request that, or is it a staff?
It's a valid question.
Well, that's the question I have. I mean, do we have to amend it if the ditch is not going to be used?
My opinion is that no, you would not have to amend it. We make technical revisions in the field all the time. This may be more significant than most of them, but that's always done on a staff level. If we change lot lines, street layouts, those kind of things, then we go through an amended plat process. But for technical revisions, after the plat has been approved, Those are typically done on a staff level.
Fair point.
So we've made the request not via a amended plat. We've made the request and have been making the request in various versions and fashions and letters over the last year.
Simply comes down to the one section of the ordinance that says if the ditch is in use, it'll be piped and the use will be maintained. So
we're cornered.
if I've got,
We don't have a choice.
I've got now a letter from Case Creek Irrigation's attorney stating they're taking that ditch out of use. So I feel like my obligation is to apply the ordinance appropriately and not require the ditch to be piped. As Felshaw mentioned earlier, to support that, because there is a lot of gray area still, and to protect the city, that's why we initiated the concept of the indemnification agreement, because Case Creek has now stuck their head out on the chopping block, and the Hills could easily sue them. They can sue the city as well because of this letter. And we don't want the city to have to defend that because it wasn't our choice. We just took the word.
Until the legal positions are actually proved, the city.
Hold on for 1 second, sir.
The city cannot take an indemnification.
Will you state your name?
Developer to continue with their development.
Name?
You can state your name
Mark
for us,
Burton, I am
please.
one of the property owners as well.
Thank you.
And that is a very ugly situation. To have a developer indemnify a city to get them to come off city ordinance and plat approvals until the courts decide whether the rights exist or not.
Rick Johnson, if you go back in history before, some of you were on council, some of you were not. When Destination decided to fill in the 2 ditches that affected my property immensely. It took me 1.5 years to get that problem resolved, and it's still not resolved 100%. The feedback I received from the city, specifically the city manager, was sue us. That's the position you're putting us in, is to sue you. That doesn't do any of us any good. Destination says that that ditch is going to be abandoned. They made that choice, not us. We don't want to abandon it. We want to continue using it as we have. I don't know how they can make that decision for us without speaking to us. It's just not right. Again, they're bullying us into something to save them money. They made a business decision to move forward, being piped. Now they don't want to live up to that business decision. They're offering an easement to us in their name, not ours, knowing that we would have to challenge that in court to achieve the goal of winning that. That's not fair either. They're throwing the dice that we're not going to spend the money to fight them. I'm willing to spend the money at this point. I'm tired of being bullied by Destination. I'm tired of being bullied over my fence issues of 4 inches that they say is theirs, which I totally disagree. I'm tired of them filling in ditches when they shouldn't have, specifically the 2 in front of my house. I'm tired of them pouring concrete in my front yard without my permission. That's not right. It's up to you guys to rein in the bully. Just, make the ordinance what it is. This isn't a guideline. You agreed to do it in their plans. They agreed when they submitted the plans. That's all we're asking. It's amazing enough, that Case Creek today sends out a letter that they're not going to service that ditch anymore. But they have to for another property owner, but not us. What do we do to make them mad? I can't answer that. What changed their opinion in the last 2 to 3 weeks? Originally, it was Mr. Green who came to us and said, you better protect your ditch. That's what started this a year ago. And that story has changed again, specifically today. So for this to be abandoned and no longer in use, that wasn't our decision. We still want to use it. That's their decision to convenience them.
Travis Hill again. So I want to thank Andy for getting to the quid pro quo. Case Creek says, we won't provide water to this ditch. We will provide water to this point, the top of the ditch, at which point gravity can take care of the rest. But on paper, we will say we will not provide water to this ditch. It's completely ludicrous. But it allows the city to interpret the letter of the law to say, oh, this ditch, which has been in continuous use for at least 20, more like 30 years, is no longer in use. That's the rub here. That's the rat that I smell. And if I were really foolish enough as a city staff member or councilman to take that position, then I would welcome indemnification, which, ironically, Mr. Bingham earlier tonight said Destination is not seeking a fight. How do you offer to indemnify Case Creek and Kaysville City and say you're not seeking a fight? It is nothing more than a bully seeking a fight they know that they can win. And so even though I respect the thoughtfulness behind the idea of going to the ombudsman, I see wisdom and merit in that. Nevertheless, I would encourage you, please do not wash your hands of this. Please do not step aside and allow Destination. Maybe it's okay because they move over to Layton City and there's a new pigeon there. Please don't step aside and wash your hands of this. I think we've exposed this for the shallow ruse that it is. We've exposed the inaccuracies and the contradictory positions. I mean, how can you say we won't provide water, we'll provide water to this point, but we won't provide water to this point? Please don't wash your hands of this. Thank you.
I just want to speak one thing with the letter that was sent today. I think you heard in your testimony tonight from Case Creek where they have softened their position there, saying perhaps we will if we don't have the liability. So even now, there is still somewhat an unknown as to that position. What we are saying is that we believe that we have a right. The plat requires that if there's an expectation of water flowing, that it be piped. What we're asking for is that you follow and enforce that provision in the plat.
I'd like to make a motion, unless anybody has any further comment.
I just had one more comment to make. I know it's late, we're after midnight now. Everybody would probably like to go home, but clearly in my mind, I remember a year or so, I guess a year ago, when I went out to Mr. Johnson's property and saw the flooding on his property. Clearly that's a detriment. I mean, what happened there in the development, you know, no fault to Mr. Johnson, all of a sudden he has flooding because of a development that came in. That, you know, forgetting any city responsibility there, or, you know, that discussion, that just seems wrong to me. It also seems wrong that because of the development, all of a sudden the water flow that property owners had been getting for 20 years or more, all of a sudden goes away. And there's no compensation for that. There's no, it's just, so sorry, we developed something and now you don't have the same rights that you had before and you're just going to have to suffer the detriment. That doesn't seem right. Having said that, there's a lot of issues here and a lot of things that are out of the city's control. I mean, basically, the way I understand it, the only thing we can really do is say the plat remains the same, the pipe has to be built, but no water will flow through it, then that issue still has to be worked out beyond the city's control. How long will that take to work through it? I don't know. But it seems to me that there's only so much the city can do, and the private parties have to, it seems like either way, even if whichever direction you go, there's going to be some time to just physically get it built, to work through the issues. And so whether you go the pressurized irrigation route in 18 months or whether you go maintain this right of way and you work through those issues and build the pipe, it seems like, just guessing here, but this season's probably already, gone. And so there is going to be a detriment there. I'm just trying to think practically here, not legally. What's the practical, quickest way to get resolution, and what role does the city have in that, which is a limited one? So it's a very complicated issue, I guess, but clearly the development did cause a detriment to these property owners.
Councilman Gar, can I just speak quickly to a couple of things? I know it is all late, and I understand, listen, working for a home builder and developer, we're always the bad guy. We are. I'm also a resident of Kaysville. Brad Wilson's a resident of Kaysville. And anytime anybody buys property and owns that property, well, they also have rights. And so having purchased the ground from the Hill family, we have rights owning that ground. And really, the question is this. It's not really a city issue. It is between adjacent property owners. They believe that the permission that was given by Joe Hill granted some right above a permission that could be removed by a subsequent property owner. We've come in and purchased a property. We have a right on that property. There was never an easement granted by Joe Hill. Had that been done and had they worked through that and said, hey, we want to use this and we'll pay you, or let's give us an easement on this so that we always have access to this, it'd be a completely different conversation. And so the city is being put in a difficult spot to say, try and adjudicate whose side you believe is right, on the issue of is there a right or is there not a right? And that's not the city's place to really do that. The ordinance that is in place, the way it was done when we initially got the final plat was because of some information that Larry in Public Works had. And we've been working, not at the last minute, not in any nefarious ways, to try and say, no, here is the real story. Here's what Joe Hill, the owner who's been here in Kaysville, I would guess as long as anybody, right? Here's his recollections of what it was. It wasn't an easement ever granted. Permission was asked and permission was given. And now, as a subsequent property owner, we're saying, we're not taking away your rights. We're simply just taking back the privilege that we have in buying the property. It was given before, and we're taking it back. So I don't expect anything I say to change anybody's minds about how evil developers are. That kind of comes
You're
with,
talking about my dad now, man. Now you're getting personal.
yeah, and he's right there with me, right? We're both horrible folks.
No, I just
so-
see it like it is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you don't, but
Yeah, so
you got to cut through all that.
And we're saying, listen, if the owners of the adjacent owners want to use it, we'll give them an easement. And if they want it, they can also pay for the pipe, and we can figure out how they can maintain that going forward. We don't believe it's, and no one, a developer can never get bullied, right? So I understand that's the case, but we're saying if it was our responsibility, we would absolutely do it. We piped 785 feet along the far west end of Phase 1 because it's a pathway for the tailwaters. Because when it's our responsibility to do it, we did it. We just simply don't believe it's our responsibility in this case to do it. And we're willing to work with and to find a solution. We want to make sure the property owners have the water that they're entitled to as owners in the irrigation company. And it is absolutely easy to stand up here, for anyone to stand up here and to say it's the wicked bad developers and why don't they just do it. When it's our responsibility, we will. When information comes up from the time a plat is given and information changes, there are always, I shouldn't say always, very often there are changes made. And so any discussion around whether our position is right on them not having a right or their position is correct on the rights they feel they have is for a different body. But there has been enough information provided, as Andy has indicated, to indicate that that pipe will not be in use.
Well, I think you've already made the point that if the water would flow through the pipe, or through the conduit, it could be piped, you would build it, right? So you've made that assertion here.
No, we've never said that we'll build it. That's because we don't believe it's our
Well,
responsibility.
except for when you agreed to it on the original plan.
No,
I know you disagreed, but you agreed on paper.
No, they put it on there, and we said, we don't believe Larry's correct in the information.
Did your
he
engineer
has.
stamp those plans?
Hold on just a second, Councilman Adams. I just wanted to follow through on that. So what did you say exactly, I mean, in terms of if we knew that the water was still going to flow So I don't want to put words in your mouth. Earlier, you were saying you would have put the pipe in. I thought you said that, but.
No, we never looked at it as needing to be a pipe there. Our understanding all along.
Oh, you just allow the water flow in the open ditch? Is that even possible with the homes there now, or?
No, if it's going to be in use, the ordinance requires that it be piped. So the question really is it going to remain in use or not? And Larry made an assertion in that pre-construction meeting that he believed it needed to be maintained in use because he believed the property owners had a right to that further use. That's been the issue all along, is that the difference of opinions between whether the adjacent property owners have an actual right, prescriptive easement or otherwise, whatever that might end up being called or determined, to have access across that property.
Well, if a member of our staff felt that way, who has been our director for 27 years now and probably knows the hills and knows the area like the back of his hand, well, then probably going to have to stand behind the member of our staff.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes, go ahead.
What was just stated is kind of the transition of the property. It went from
State your name for us again
Rick
so we can
Johnson.
keep track of everybody
Rick
who's
Johnson.
talking.
So it went from Joe Hill to Destination, and they say that we don't have a right. So, and they did not grant us the right. Why were we able to use that ditch in use for 2 years as they were developing the other pieces? When they first bought it and transferred it to their ownership, why didn't they send us letters denying us of that access? All of a sudden, it's coming up now. We've been using it as they own the property, so that kind of shoots everything you just said straight to the depths of the ditch.
No, it doesn't. They've still been farming the land as we've been developing it, so Hills have still been farming.
I think this should conclude it. Mark Burton again, property owner. In fact, I'm Kevin Hill's next door neighbor, and I've been there 17 years. But what we're talking about here is a difference of opinion as to what the legal rights are or what they are not. And just because, you know, you get a letter from Case Creek attorney saying what they think their rights are in terms of their obligation to provide water down whatever ditch they need to provide it down, doesn't mean that that is what the rights are. And so until a court of competent jurisdiction can make those determinations so the city knows that water will never flow down that ditch, the city, in my opinion, has no other alternative except to say, until that is determined, the ordinance says if you're going to complete your development, you're going to have to put the pipe in. And we can't change it until that determination is made in a legal way that we know what it is. So it's not a matter of opinion between what you say and what we say. And anybody that tries to indemnify, especially a developer, a city, to go against that so they can finish their development, puts the city at great risk of being, you know, labeled and blamed and accused and litigated of being in bed with the developer. And so that is just a stinky thing to even hear that kind of thing can happen. And so I think as we conclude, it just ought to be what it is, because that's what the ordinance is, until it's proven that that ditch will not be able to take water.
Thanks, Mark.
And if, there's been some great suggestions here about us as property owners coming together and finding a solution, and that obviously needs to happen. However, if we step away from the ordinance and say you have no obligation, Destination Homes, to pipe that ditch, there will be no discussion. It's a done deal for them. So in order to have some sort of motivation for all the parties to continue to come to the table, it will require Kaysville City standing by the ordinances and the approval as it stands now.
Mr. Hill, I just have one question for you, and perhaps this isn't a fair question to answer because it's a hypothetical, but if working through all the process to you know, look at your own liability, if that's what it takes to get Case Creek to run the water through there and to maintain the pipe. If that were to take 18 months, or you could have the pressurized water in 18 months, what would you prefer, I guess? Or if the time frame is similar, I'm just trying to think practically again, not legally, not trying to answer those questions or even obligate the council in any way to make that decision, but just, practically speaking.
Well, as it stands right now, we have no ditch to work with, so we're forced to try and make the best use we can of the alternate route. So we'll
Yeah.
do that the best we can, in the interim.
So the hope would be that if the city enforces the plat and decides not to change it, then Destination Homes would put in the conduit for the irrigation, and then you'd have to work through the other issues to try and get the water to flow through it.
Yeah, and I can honestly say I know what the best solution is right now. I mean, there's obvious problems with assuming that liability, bonding, et cetera, that we would certainly rather not do. If there's a better solution than that, then,
And I have no idea what's involved there, but
yeah.
it, could be easy, could probably not easy, though, I would
Well,
guess that. Yeah.
pressurized change forces them to change their way of life again, though. It's sprinkler heads in the pastures. The horses are kicking them, breaking them. There's a reason why they flood irrigate. So we're forcing them to constantly adapt to changes that they shouldn't have to be adapting to. They should have quiet enjoyment of their property. And the shareholders really are the ones who own the company, correct, Scott? The shareholders are really the ones who own the company collectively, right? And you're the directive body. You guys are, you're shareholders, you're owner in this company. I'm sure you can make an agreement with them. The Greens are some of the best people I have ever met. Woody Green, Scott, some of the best guys I've ever met. And you've already kind of seen him here tonight, be willing to be amicable, or we have. The one thing I'm not seeing, and Jake alluded to it, there's no guarantee that anyone has presented that we as a body of the Kaysville City Council can preserve the lifestyle of our residents. No one has presented that. So I have a problem with that. I have a problem with this ditch should work, might work. Hey, run up 2 miles in the middle of the night and shut some head gates off that are, I hate to say the word illegally, but taking the water or whatever. The city, though, get to your point, Mr. Destination, whether you want to hear it or not, you said the city, and that's fine, you said the city doesn't have any right. Mr. Destination, Rick,
Councilman,
let me just, I just want to get his, I don't know his name. So the city, though, you said we don't have any right.
It's Steve Bingham for
Thanks,
Destination
Steve.
Homes.
You said we don't have any right, but Steve, what we do have is the authority to uphold our plans, our ordinances, what we agreed to in the past, and what our staff agreed to. This is not about what is right or wrong, it's about responsibility. So I would once again like to make a motion, if that's all right with you, Mr. Garner.
No, I'd like to ask one more question
thoroughly-
on something that you said, which actually I thought was a good question.
Oh, excellent.
If Mr. Hill could answer it. Is there a preference, like all other things being equal, if you could have the water flow, you would prefer to have flood irrigation? Is that a substantial distinction? If you were just answering the question on that, pressurized or flood irrigation, do you have a preference there to Councilman Adams'
Yeah,
point?
we would stay with flood irrigation. There's less expense, less maintenance, et cetera, with that system as it currently exists.
I think that's
Thank you.
a decision that we need to go through. I think pressurized.
Mr. Johnson?
In the long run, pressurized in the long run is a much more efficient way of watering. The problem is we're not going to see pressurized for how many years? They say 18 months. There's no way they're going to get it to us in 18 months. There is not a chance it's going to happen. So until then, what do? And a lot of these problems we're discussing tonight are going to go away as we end up changing our property at some point. We're all going to be houses down there eventually. So by the time pressurized gets there, we're probably not going to be pressurizing our back pastures. It's probably easier to flood irrigate. It's more efficient to pressurized. If I had the option and had pressurized right now, I'd probably choose pressurized right now because it uses so much less water.
It would certainly be an argument for the least expensive method, as Councilman Adams was suggesting before, if it's,
Pressurized to me is the most expensive method.
No, I meant.
Because all of a sudden I've got to run pipes.
I just meant the more strong, root-resistant option as opposed to the cement.
And it's still
that
my
gets there.
understanding that we can't have pressurized out of Case Creek in our yards. Is that correct, Scott?
By ordinance.
I think in the front yards is right. We talked a little bit about this, and I think with Davis and Weber, they would not want to supply those backyards, those 4 acres, 5 acres, whatever you have, okay? We have the water capacity. We have the ability to do that. They can get loans through NRCS that pays 80% of these hookups. It takes about 1.5 years to get it done, you know? And now would be the time to start with it. I mean, Kevin likes to flood, but you can save 35 to 40% of your water. If you want to be conservative, that's the way you go. If you don't, then you stay flooded.
We keep getting sidetracked on side issues.
Yeah, and that.
This is not our issue tonight.
Yeah.
We have one issue, whether to hold the ordinance or not. That's your only decision. Any dispute between us and the water company is between us and the water company. That's not your fight.
Yeah, that's true, but I was trying to understand that, you know, understand or talk about a little bit the possibility of the private parties resolving that, even though that's not our, entertain the discussion a little bit.
We can all bet on the futures.
Yeah.
But we're here tonight for today. We need today's issue resolved. And today's issue strictly goes back, are you going to uphold the ordinance or are you not? That's it. It's an easy decision. Do the right thing.
For these good neighbors, council, please don't set a precedent that we don't uphold the things that we approve. Please, for these good
I haven't
people.
met you, so state your name.
I'm sorry, Mark Robinson.
Rick Johnson.
It was approved. That was part of the deal. It was originally said to save time and money. It wasn't about, we didn't feel responsible. It was to save time and money. You change your story. It was recorded. Plat was recorded. That was the requirement. Please uphold what you agreed to.
Sorry, I didn't change my story. We never believed we were responsible.
Well, maybe we're just in a different chapter of the book, but.
No, we never believed we were responsible. It's not saying, hey, we were responsible, now we're not. I just wholeheartedly disagree with a statement of saying, hey.
We
we're
understand
asking-
you do.
We're saying we're responsible, now we're not. No, we disagreed from the get-go. And we're not even asking you to disobey your ordinance. We're saying that the application of the ordinance at the time the plans were done were based on one set of information, that the ditch might be in use that we had disagreed with.
Do you
now-
understand that you'd have had a lot more leverage then than you do now, though? I mean, you did lead yourself down a road, you did lead the horse to the water.
We've been working on this the entire time.
Wow. But, guys,
I guess that is all
Yeah,
water
we're
under
talking
the
with-
bridge, though, what happened before, you know, I don't think we can
yes.
litigate that,
Right,
but
but the passion's been said is maintain the ordinance, don't set a precedence for not following the ordinance.
Okay.
Are we breaking an ordinance, Andy?
We're trying very hard to follow the ordinance here. The ordinance also says if the ditch is not in use, it should be abandoned.
but let's circumvent that with the
So-
fact that we write the ordinances. Don't make us rewrite it. We have heard enough tonight from these guys. Guys, I mean, in the future, if you guys go make your deals, you got great folks to work with. Even you, Steve, you're a great guy. I know
Even
that.
me, thank you.
Yes, sorry, but well, you're the one who said the developers are evil, you know, but what if a BMX track got built there? Would we be calling the BMX guys evil?
Yes.
So my point is, you know what? Value engineer this all you guys want. I love value engineering. If you want to take the 30, 40K that's going to cost you to pipe the ditch, and you get these guys appeased, like, okay, if you start secondary right now, we'll deal with the headache of your other route. But you put that 40K towards secondary and you get rip and pipe now. You know, I don't know. These are just ideas. If you want to use that money in a different manner and they agree, great. Susan, you have a comment, so I don't want to motion until you comment, but.
just
No,
one
sorry.
clarification
I'm
question.
sorry.
Do we even, if the existing plat has it shows this being piped, do we even need a motion? Because the motion would be to change the plat, right?
No,
To
we need
amend
the-
the plat.
well,
Well,
we
he
need-
said
it's on
we
the
didn't.
agenda. We can vote
He
on
said we
this.
don't need to do anything according to
No, but what
staff
would the
usually takes
motion-
care of it. So all we can do is stop the change from happening.
Oh, stop
can
the
give
technical.
direction on
Formal
that.
motion to end this and not just let it lie. Make the motion and uphold what you've already approved.
No, I'm not I'm not there yet. I was just asking a procedural question of,
But I
because
think-
the existing plat is already there, is it necessary to make a motion or anyway? And
I
that
would ask
question's
that
been
you do.
answered.
You've heard from all of us. We're all repeating ourselves at this point.
And that was actually brings me to my next point. I think
I think we
we're
should be
done
done.
with public conversation now. If council wants to have some more deliberation or make a motion, I think I really appreciate everything that's been shared, and I think we all understand everyone's point of view. At this point, the issue is with the council on what you want to do next.
I kind of cut into Councilwoman Lee.
Well, the thing that bothers me is that I heard the ditch was being filled in before the letter arrived saying there was no use for it. The timing of it is just backwards, and so I can't see that this wasn't all planned out personally.
On that note, I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with this and that we uphold what has been put on the plan and profile right now. We uphold that the ditch is to be piped as far as the city is concerned. And if the city needs to put any kind of leverage on that, I'll probably need some advice, either from somebody on the council. If building permits need to be held up, or if construction needs to be held up to light a fire under this so that all parties can get to an agreement quick, so that everybody's back to life again. So I make a motion that we uphold the way it is right now, that the ditch is to be piped as far as the city of Kaysville is concerned. And as far as Kaysville City is concerned, we are not willing to see any further progress on the project until this has come to some sort of terms.
And Councilman Adams, I think I'd be willing to second, except for your motion's very expansive. It says, put in the ditch and all of that, and I think the question is, the way I understand the motion is to say, to direct staff not to change the,
Right.
not to change the plat showing that the pipe needs to be built. But I'm not sure, and I guess if anybody can answer that question, I'm not sure we can really direct it. to
Remind
be
us,
built.
Andy, of where we are in process, because what we have to hold, if a motion similar to that were to carry, what leverage, if you will, or where are we at in the process?
What you're telling me is that the ditch needs to be piped. My recommendation is that we follow normal subdivision procedures towards issuing permits and other things. It's spelled out clearly. Certain things have to be done before we can issue building permits or record the plat.
This would be one of them.
We should follow the outlined procedures and not deviate from it.
Right. Just
So I make a
proceed.
motion then that simplify it, that we uphold the plan and the ditch is to be piped as far as the city of Kaysville is concerned. And that's the end of the motion. Now, I mean, if you guys go and make something, great. But that's the way I see the city's position personally.
So I'm going to recognize that motion and call for a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion by Councilmember Adams and a second by Councilmember Lee for a motion as outlined. Further discussion?
Yes, I think I agree largely with the motion. I would only would like, and maybe this needs to be a substitute motion or ask for an amended motion, that ultimately we've got to get some kind of a judgment on that. However that's handled, although I think to Mr. Burton's point, the only party that can make that kind of a call, I hope it doesn't have to get to a judge, but that's why we have a property rights ombudsman that can make that determination. And I would love to see that issue recommended to, whether that's by the independent parties or whether that's in conjunction with the city, to get a determination made by the state official who is set aside to make those kinds of decisions, and to see such that currently, we're, again, operating under the auspices of the final plat approval, which demonstrates that the pipe will be installed unless and until a judgment is made that indicates that the pipe doesn't need to be installed according to our ordinance.
With all due respect, I'd like to just maintain my motion. I think giving them suggestions on how to handle it is going beyond our authority level here tonight, and I mean, and if my motion fails, then so be it, then maybe hopefully that one will add in on round 2, but I'd like to maintain it there. I think they'll figure this out on their own.
Well, I just make it, that's not necessarily what Councilman Snell says, it's not part of the motion, but I would just say a couple things. First, I have no problem with that process going forward too, because that would, I guess, seem to be important. So the way I see this motion is, we're just saying that we're directing staff not to change the plat as a technical thing.
correct.
That's it.
That's
You know,
right.
so any of the other processes could go forward.
Which our plat says pipe the ditch.
Yeah, and the other comment I would make, the reason I'm going to vote aye on this motion, that limited motion, I guess comes, it's not an issue, so it's not an issue just because there are residents, and I want to make this clear, and I want to do what is in their best interest, although that may be true too, but I guess what the point I'm trying to make is, I feel like I just don't like it when something, it's like the old thing that people move in right at the end of a runway and then complain about the runway and try to get it removed. Or vice versa. Maybe when the runway comes in after the homes are there, those homeowners have, hey, I'm going to fight this runway being there because I was here first. And I think the sense of unfairness that somehow a neighbor, and I completely agree with the representative from Destination Home said that there's a property right there. Completely agree. But having said that, the whole concept of planning and zoning and the role of a city is that at some point you're a detriment to your neighbor. And if that occurs, that strikes me as unfair, where there's sort of a use there that's a precedent for over 20 years, and now all of a sudden, because a new subdivision, I shouldn't use the word right, that there's at least a usage or an implied right, a usage, I shouldn't even try to talk in legal terms, but at least the use was there, and now, to no fault of the property owners at all, that use goes away because of what a neighbor does on their property. And that's why I would vote aye. It just seems inherently unfair to me.
If you're comfortable then,
Yeah,
Mr. Garn.
let me make a comment here. First of all, I've had a situation like this in my life on property I had. And I can see the concerns of both. And to me, some ways it's crazy to pipe in a ditch that it's not going to have water. But, just like Larry the attorney said, if you fill it in the ditch, you never know. You're not going to have water ever. I guess the whole point of it is, and I think that the thing that Destination needs to understand, and I think that you're going to find out, and I guess this is the question I have. If Destination goes right out and pipes it in and gives an easement to these people and say, you know what, this is your baby. I mean, now you got to work with a ditch company and you got to get the water flowing again. Now, Andy, is there any reason, if they do that, to hold up Destination from going forward and selling lots and moving on? It seems to me that if they got entangled in a lawsuit, they're going to lose a lot more money than that cost of that ditch putting it in to fight a lawsuit or even the time. Even if they won the lawsuit and say it's 5, 6, 7 months down the road, they're going to lose way more money on that, just the interest of time and the usage of money. I just think that it would probably be wise for Destination to knock that out as fast as they can and move forward. And let these guys go forward with their thing and see if they can work a deal out with a ditch company. If they can't, they can't. But I just think that that's probably the best way to go.
Well, thank you, Paige and Garn, for those summaries of what we've been discussing for the last 2 or 3 hours. They're great. I'd like to stick with my original motion and kick the soccer ball down the hill here. I don't remember if there was a second.
Yeah, I second
There was a
that.
motion made in a second. I just have one clarifying question. If Destination's granting an easement, I guess that's up to them to figure out, are they granting it to an entity? Are they granting it to a group of property owners? Are they granting it to an irrigation company, which it sounds like they're not? But I guess that's not really.
Put an LLC together or something with insurance.
But I gather from our conversation, they're not granting it to us, and we're the city's not taking it either.
The city stays out of this.
So administratively, you'll make sure that's whoever's taking over whatever ditch is supposed is prepared to be built administratively, you'll make sure that that doesn't get lost in the shuffle and somehow it's like, well, everybody thinks Kaysville's taking care of the ditch or something.
Mayor, I'm sorry, point of personal privilege.
I think if
That's-
you can make that statement, that the property owner should have some input with destination on the quality of pipe. Of course, that's not your decision.
Well, it's a good point. It's going to need to meet city standard.
And they can, and we can't have them come in.
It's RCP on the plan. So that's what we're upholding. That's good pipe.
So,
You know,
if I may,
Yes.
I just.
or HDPE.
I just want to make this point, and I don't want to point to anyone in particular, but again, we're considering rules of conduct on the council, and there's a specific reason. I understand that we have discussed this issue ad nauseum, and it was probably necessary to do. But I believe that when I make a vote, I want to express, and it wasn't a summary of everything that was said, to express why I'm voting the way I did. And I also appreciated Councilman Page's comments, but I don't appreciate and don't think it's appropriate to make derogatory comments to either members of the public or to members of the council.
I'm sorry if you took me that way, Mr. Garn. There was no derogatory intended. So if you did, I apologize. But you did summarize.
I accept your apology.
You did a good job summarizing, so,
Okay.
so did Councilmember Page.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the table. I would ask for any more discussion, but I'm just going to ask for a vote instead. Mr. Page, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 I will say aye as well, and I again reiterate that I think we need to get an independent judgment on that. So,
Thank you.
Well, yeah, so for now, it upholds until they come back and say, here's where we're
right, I mean,
at.
that was the motion. Motion is,
All right.
plat's approved as it is.
Thank you.
Hey, you can't go anywhere. You got to stay here to the end with us, huh? You buggers. Yeah, get out of here. Get out of our courtroom.
Next on the agenda is discussion of, process appointment of planning commission members. As you may recall, council, we have the terms of 3 planning commission members that will expire on June 30th per 1741 of the revised ordinances of Kaysville City. The mayor is to propose a process for appointment for your review of approval. All 3 of the existing commission members, Gary Bullock, Betty Parker, and Thomas Wood, who we just Thomas, who we just appointed earlier this year, are asking to be appointed. They do a fine job, and I would suggest the process be immediately to reappoint Gary Bullock, Betty Parker, and Thomas Wood to new 3-year terms in the city council,
And
on the planning commission.
they all want to continue, I take it?
Yeah,
Yes.
they're all asking to be reappointed.
They're all asking to be reappointed.
Okay.
Well, let me say, I go to most of those meetings, and I tell you what, they're a great planning commission. I mean, not only do they have a diversity of thought, which is really good, but I think that they're doing a wonderful job. I think we have a great planning commission right now.
Just having served 4.5 years on the planning commission, I didn't know Thomas Wood, but I've talked with him several times since I've been on the council, and I have to say, these people are top-notch.
They are.
And I really enjoyed working with them, so.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Gary Bullock, Betty Parker, and Thomas Wood to a new 3-year term on the Kaysville Planning Commission.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Page. As outlined, any further discussion? Councilmember Garn, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Next on our agenda is councilmember reports. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item.
Yes, thank you. I think that's good enough, yeah.
Attaboy.
Amen with
Now,
that one.
seriously, any council member reports that are urgent enough to be discussed at 20 to
We're
1?
gonna hold off on that one.
I'll send you an email.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
We
Next
found
on
out
our-
we can't email, so we'll
Yeah.
just do that.
Exactly.
Next on our agenda is approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes.
We do.
Or
Both
do
for
we?
the 19th.
Both for the 19th of May. If you had a chance to review, I'd welcome a motion for their approval.
Just a quick one, Maria, on the first page, under call to the public, limited to 3 minutes, second line, well, paragraph, if you will.
Which month, which meeting?
Oh, May 19.
The main meeting, the 7 PM one.
Yeah. So down, call to the public, limited to 3 minutes section. And if you go to the second paragraph, Councilmember Adams rebutted the statement that he is claiming corruption against the city. I would like that, what I I guess, anyway, it should, in my opinion, it should say, I have never said that on the record.
Oh, okay.
I've never said that in an open public meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. So, claiming corruption against the city in a public meeting. It's never been discussed by me in an open meeting.
So you're proposing that we add in a public meeting at the end of that sentence?
Yeah, that's my intention, that's what I meant.
That it was
that's
never
what I
discussed.
Yeah, and it's true, I mean.
So are you making a motion with that amendment for approval of the?
Yes, sir.
of the
Yeah, I'll make a
minutes?
motion without amendment that we accept the claims as is with the one amendment.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion for approval of the minutes and a second by Councilmember Adams and a second by Councilmember Lee with the amendment as offered. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next on our agenda is approval of claims. You have one set of claims dated June 1st, 2016 at 2:36 PM in the amount of $247,015.05.
I'll make the motion that we approve the claims as they are, Mayor.
I'll second that.
A motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Page. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, you have before you a review of calendar. You have a 2-month calendar in front of you. Arts and Music in the Park will be a week from Saturday. We invite you to all come out for that. We'll let you read the rest. Next is adjournment.
Move that we adjourn, Mayor.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Snell. I'll call that a second by Councilmember Adams. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You know, something that,
Oh, forgot to say that.
That's right. Dang it. We're going to have our next meeting before that. So we can announce that too.
Okay, okay.
Next meeting will be on the 16th, I believe.
Maria?
Jacob was directly affected
Maria?
by Smith's being built.
Let this run.